Well, we're happy to have you guys join us today. Cynthia Mackinnon and Steve Leary, who are the candidates for mayor in Winter Park's election on March 10th. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's correct.
Well, we want to get some procedural questions out of the way, some pleasantness, but we ask every candidate these questions, so don't feel offended. And I'll start with you, Mr. Leary. Have you ever been arrested?
I have not.
And Ms. McKinnon?
No.
And have you ever declared bankruptcy, Mr. Leary?
No, I have not.
And Ms. McKinnon?
No, I have not.
All right, now the pleasantness out of the way. We can proceed.
I've lived in this area all my life. I grew up in Orlando, but after college I moved back to Winter Park in 1967 for all the reasons that most people move to Winter Park, all the beautiful assets that we have. And I retired early from the bench because there were a number of things I wanted to do in the community that I hadn't been able to do while I was working. I wanted to work in the neonatal intensive care unit, but that requires 40 hours of training, which I wasn't able to do while I was working. So I took that training and I started working there, enrolled in a course, and was just doing a lot of things when I looked around and I saw a lot of things that alarmed me that were happening in our city. Like the proposal of baseball stadiums directly adjacent to neighborhoods, building which was way beyond what the codes permitted, particularly on Denning, and just a lack of courtesy and respect and decorum in commission meetings. And so I began to study and learn more. On the bench, I was ethically prohibited from being involved in politics. So I began to study and learn more about the issues and decided this was something I really wanted to do. I started out saying to the people who were urging me to run, well, I'm not going to knock on doors in strange neighborhoods, walk around in neighborhoods, and I'm not going to ask for money. Now I ask everyone for money, and I walk all over the neighborhoods. I find really that walking around in neighborhoods has been one of the best parts of this campaign, one of the things I've enjoyed the most. We do that every Saturday morning all over the city, and I just love doing that.
For a quick redirect, you mentioned the lack of courtesy, respect, and decorum in commission meetings. Was there one person who was responsible for this, or was this a commission-wide problem?
The mayor was generally responsible for it, but I think he also was responsible for just a general sort of a lack of a decorum you observed. In the courtroom, lawyers are not permitted to look disgusted or roll their eyes. That's just considered professionally unethical. And you would see that from time to time, but I would say principally it was the mayor interrupting people, and it was very obvious he has great antipathy for one of the commissioners. And lately she's begun to ask him not to be, actually in a meeting, not to be rude to her, which is, when you're sitting in the audience and that sort of thing happens on a commission meeting, people just roll their eyes because it's just not what you expect of elected officials.
Mr. Leary, same question to you. Why are you running for the mayor's office?
My answer is pretty quick. My 3 children. I have 9-year-old triplets. My wife and I came and visited my brother some years back. He was a long-term resident of Winter Park. And we decided when we started a family we wanted to raise them in Winter Park. We were blessed with 9-year-old triplets. I'm familiar with the neonatal unit. They spent some time there over, and Dr. Gregor Alexander's become a very good friend, and he does an amazing job down here at Arnold and Winnie Palmer. So I look at them. I wake up to the future every morning. I see these 9-year-olds, and I'm concerned. I got involved 4 years ago. I joined the commission. I ran. I've been appointed the vice mayor 3 of the last 4 years. And I ran because I was really interested as to where we were heading directionally as a city. There is the charm and character and the soul of Winter Park is its people. And we have an amazing city. Again, the reason we moved here in the first place. But when I looked at the growth in the region, and you look at 300,000 new residents in the past decade in Orange and Seminole County, I started to say, well, where do we fit in that place? And we can't just isolate ourselves. Winter Park is not an island. It is an oasis. But we need to be able to work regionally with our partners. And I decided to get involved because I thought that there seemed to be just a movement to kind of isolate, to kind of just protectionism. And I just felt that was not going to serve my children well, and that was not going to serve my children's children well. So I decided to get involved, and we've done some great things in the city, and we can probably cover these during the rest of the time we have together today. But I want to keep that going. I want to keep all the great things going that we've been doing. I want to be very clear as to what we have done, and I want to continue the great stuff, being on the cover of US Air magazine, being in a Super Bowl commercial, being in Travel and Leisure, being in Forbes. Just recently we were in the Boston Globe last week, or 2 weeks ago. We are no longer just the envy of our neighbors. We're the envy of cities and municipalities worldwide, and I love that. And I think that that is a great opportunity for us, and we need to manage that again to make sure that we're taking care of our character and our soul, so that we can deliver something special to our children.
Well, what distinguishes you from your opponent, Mr. Leary?
Well, I think my experience, without question. I've spent the last 4 years learning how things operate in City Hall. I know how the system works. As I said, I've been appointed the vice mayor 3 of the last 4 years by my fellow commission members. My small business, I'm a small business guy. That's what I do. I'm not a politician. I'm an elected official who it's a part-time job. I'm not in the system. I'm not of the system. I am, I think in the past 4 years in my elected government position, I've collected somewhere around $9,000 in 4 years for my position. I'm a small business person. I figure out problems. That's what I do day in, day out. I work with people to get to solutions. I have to work with people to get solutions. Sitting up on the commission level is most like running a business, because you don't sit up there by yourself. You actually have to work with teammates to try to get things done. And it's working with conflicting points of view. I've been on the winning side of votes. I've been on the losing side of votes. And when I'm on the losing side of votes, I don't take my ball and go home. I still try to figure out how to make projects better. So I think that definitely sets me apart from my opponent. And again, all the appreciation for her service as a judge, but it's much more like operating a business sitting up at City Hall, and I've got that recent and relevant experience to do that.
What about that point, Ms. Mackinnon, the experience? Do you think that the skills that you wielded as a judge transitioned to running Winter Park as mayor?
Certainly I do, but I have a lot more than that. I have been working for 40 years. I first taught at Valencia. After that, I was the executive director of hospice in Central Florida, which became VITAS. When I took over hospice, it was a struggling business with a budget deficit. I hired the staff, wrote the job descriptions, developed a business plan, rented office space, raised all the money. This was before Medicare reimbursement, so all the money had to be raised. So I ran that business, and by the time I left, we had a budget surplus. After that, I became a lawyer. Well, I went to law school at 39 with 2 kids and a mortgage and a house. I had to move to Gainesville. I graduated with honors, and I was on Law Review, an editor of Law Review. And then I joined a big firm, and my practice was exclusively devoted to litigation all over the United States, from Colorado to Texas to Arkansas to Mississippi, involved with the failure of the S&Ls. This was at the time when all the savings and loan businesses were failing. And I was involved in litigation regarding large commercial real estate loans all over the country. What makes a good project, why the loans fail, a lot of lessons that we should have learned with the big meltdown we had right before the last recession. But I did that litigation all over the United States, and then I became a judge. And while I was a judge, I was in every division. I was in felony, civil, juvenile delinquency, juvenile dependency, domestic, family, domestic violence. There are not many good things that go on in a courthouse, only the occasional adoption. But I've been involved with every kind of problem that afflicts society. And as a judge, you have to become an instant expert in a variety of subjects. You may be in a trial involving securities fraud, or it may be a breach of contract, or a dissolution of a business, or a murder, or a medical malpractice trial. And you have a court reporter here trying to make a record of everything that's going on. If it's a med mal, you may have words like this with no vowels that this person is trying to get down. You also have the clerk who's handling all the evidence that's being submitted. No evidence can go to a jury until it's been admitted, so you have to be constantly watching what's going on with the evidence. There may be thousands of pieces of paper to make sure that evidence is not presented to the jury or shown to the jury before it's actually been admitted. You have to watch the lawyers, make sure that they have their witnesses so that you don't waste time when one witness is finished. You have to watch the jury, make sure the jury's understanding that they're not tired. So all of this translates. Managing a complex trial is multitasking on steroids. Running a commission meeting is a cakewalk compared to what I've done in managing trials. I've also been deeply involved in the community for 40 years. I've been on many boards of directors, been on the Winter Park Y, been on the CRA in the city of Winter Park. I also am a mother, a wife, a friend, community involved, and a grandmother. My children went to Lakemont. One of them still lives in Winter Park, and he has 3 girls. They ride their bikes to Lakemont just as my sons did. I have 8 young children in my family that are in the Winter Park community, all of them in public schools in Winter Park. I know about the problems and the issues that young families, like Mr. Leary's, face with 3 9-year-olds, because I have many nieces and nephews and my own grandchildren. I participate in the teach-in at Lakemont. When that comes up, I have been a reader of books at Lakemont when the early bus arrives for the children, when they have the ones who come in for breakfast. So I've been very involved with all ages of children. We have so many young families involved in our campaign that we have people who come to walk on the weekends with babies in backpacks and with little kids with them. Of course, anybody, if you ring a doorbell, will let you in if you have a little kid or a dog with you. So, but it's fun to see. So I also have a bachelor's degree from Emory. I have a master's degree. I have a law degree. So I have a lifetime of very, very varied professional and volunteer and personal experiences that I think equip me to do this job.
Mr. Leary, one of the, defining issues in this campaign is development.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, surprise. So my question to you is then, what yardstick do you use to determine if the area is growing at a sufficient rate?
I think that's it's a multi-layered question. We have the comprehensive plan, which guides development within our community. Excuse me, I'm getting over some bronchitis, so bear with me for a moment. I think in general, though, I want to talk about the big picture, and then we'll kind of dial it down. The city of Winter Park, over the course of the last 10 years, has gone from 2003 to 2012, has gone from a tax base, property value tax base, of 65% residential, 35% commercial, to 74% residential, 26% commercial. Residents are net users of services. We lose money on ourselves. We just do. That's the way the system is set up. When our commercial tax base is in such a decline, or has been in such a decline, we need to make sure that we take care of that. We need a commercial tax base, a healthy commercial tax base, in order to progress as a city, in order to keep the services that we like at the level that they are at. over the course of the past 4 years that I've been on the commission, we've been very intent on trying to correct that imbalance. Again, so as that slip went from 35% to 24% in value, or 26% in value of commerce, that was a 6% slip total in value. It's not property size, it's property value, because we don't tax on size, we tax on value. So it's an important distinction. So we have looked out to areas like Ravidage to make sure that that tax base comes online. That's an important tax base. The city community leaders prior to my arrival made sure that they negotiated with the developer out there to assemble the property, take it into one jurisdiction to get their rights and entitlements, and then come back into Winter Park. There were some questions, do we want it back in Winter Park? Well, yeah, if it's going to be at our doorstep, we need to take advantage of the tax benefits of having it there. So when that property comes online and is fully built out, that the value will be somewhere between $250 and $300 million estimated. That will be a nice boon to our commercial tax base. There were projects that were already greenlit. We're going to probably talk about Paseo a little bit. Paseo was approved, which is the apartment complex on the corner of Canton and Denning. It was originally approved in 2006, before I was on the commission, before any of the current commission members were on the commission. It was approved for a 140-unit condominium building. They had entitlements to build 370,000 square feet. Now, there's been some disagreement on over what those entitlements are, but I can read from the planning director, again, who says, well, just in depth a little bit, the size, height, and lot coverage granted to the property owner R4 is exactly the same as they would be granted under the current comprehensive plan. So there's some discussion, there's been some confusion over what would they be allowed today versus what they were allowed in 2006. It's clear from the planning director that it's the same height that they would be granted. As a result, the property owner and developer of the apartment complex had the right to build a building the size and scale that you currently see on the site. The city was compelled to restore the R4 zoning allowances per state law. In total square feet, this project is smaller and less dense than the one approved in 2006. We worked with the property owner. He could have come back and built a 370,000 square foot building. And he was also the property owner of the adjoining property, the Publix liquor site. They were allowed to build, again, by entitlements granted under a previous comprehensive plan, up to a 50,000 square foot on that building. We negotiated with them, we worked with them. We made the building 24,000 square feet smaller. So the 370,000 square feet is now 46,000 square feet. Too many numbers floating around here. And we were able to say to him, we will grant you the units that you believe you have in the 50,000 square feet. We'll tuck them in the same footprint that you already have entitlements to on the 370, now 46,000 square foot building. But we're not going to let you put that 50,000 square foot building up. So what we did was we took a total of 74,000 square feet of volume off the sites. We did not increase density. We transferred the density from the 50,000 square foot into that building. So what we negotiated with the developer was that we would allow additional apartment units within the same shell they were previously approved for condominium units, but that we would count against any future claim for units on the Publix liquor site. The overall site's density has not been increased and actually has been decreased. There are just more units in more or less the same shell, creating less structure overall on the site. So the city actually reduced density, square footage on the entire site from the city planner. Again, there was some confusion, so I checked with the city attorney and I said, I want to make sure that we're clear on this. And he says, if the owner had vested rights or a reasonable commercial expectation of how he could develop the property in 2006 in terms of height, FAR, and units per acre, and thereafter the 2009 comp plan reduced FAR, units per acre or height, then a Burt Harris Act violation would likely have existed at the time. So the city attorney agreed with city staff that we needed to be careful. We could not deny the rights. Now some people have said, I just want to build to code. If we just allowed to build to code, remember, it would have been 370,000 square feet. It would have been 24,000 square feet larger, and they would have had the right to build a 50,000 square foot building next door. So that's what you get with me, too. You will get somebody who works with people to try to figure things out. Do I like the building? I'm not sure I'm crazy about it right now. I'd like to see it when it's all built out at final. When they came to us and said, and we negotiated this deal, they said, do you like it? I said, yeah, I like it. I mean, it's less than it was supposed to be. You know, that's what you get. We negotiated a smaller building, and we negotiated no building next door. Trader Joe's. People are complaining about Trader Joe's. I actually voted no. I voted no when Trader Joe's came back in and said, we want to make one building from I think it was 4,500 square feet to 7,500 square feet. Myself and Commissioner Cooper voted no. We lost that battle 3-2. Again, you don't take your ball and go home. You try to fix it. You try to make it better. So while we lost that vote, what we ended up doing, and it was a motion that I made it was an amendment that I made to the motion, was to require an additional 19 parking spaces across the street. So it's not perfect, but we got extra parking across the street. So while the developer was in a deficit of 21 spots, we required him to have 40. He agreed. You work with people to make things better. Just a little bit, sorry I'm going on so long, but I want to be very clear on some of these things that I think there's been miscommunication on. When we talk about development overall, I have spent a good part of my time in 4 years trying to clean up Fairbanks. I was told when I ran, you're nuts. Nobody can fix Fairbanks. But I will tell you, when I had a friend of mine who was in town at a convention call me, and he said, hey, I'll meet you in town for dinner. And he got off on Fairbanks, and he called me from the exit, and he said, I think I'm in the wrong place. I said, well, we're going to fix that, because Fairbanks is a little bit tired, dated, to say the least. So I've spent 4 years working with state legislatures, working with city staff, and working with my fellow commission members. We now have sewer going out to I-4 that did not exist before. That will allow for density out there. Everybody out there was on septic. We have billboards. We've been removing billboards. If I recall last count, we removed 3 billboards from that. We have power lines that the state, and I led the team and I led the fight for this, the state is in their budget $12 million to underground the transmission lines on Fairbanks from I-4 to 1792. Again, there's been some confusion on that as well. That was never in the city budget because those are not our power lines. They are now Duke Energy's power lines, which they inherited when they purchased Progress. But we've worked with as an economic development tool, we've worked with the state to get $12 million allocated to underground a private company's lines, which will change the landscape of Fairbanks. So development is important for the success, long-term success of Winter Park, long-term financial health. Again, I spent 4 years working on the financial health of Winter Park, and we're in the best financial shape this city has ever been in. It's one of the reasons I have the support of so many former mayors. They know that I can step in and do this job because I've worked on it so hard. But we are in the best financial shape because of the steps we've taken. And I will tell you what, Fairbanks is where that development needs to go. It's where that density needs to go, and it needs to go on Lee too. And that's the next path. But when we complete out there, when we finish the work we've got planned for those roadways and for those areas, we will definitely increase our commercial base, and it'll be a real assist to the residents of Winter Park.
Thank you. Ms. Mackinnon, the floor is yours.
I should have been taking copious notes. You covered so many. No, I think I remember, but you've covered so much ground here. First of all, commercial versus residential tax base. Our city is 125 years old. When it was originally conceived, we had a central commercial district, Park Avenue, and then much larger residential. We've always had roughly a quarter commercial, 3/4 residential, pretty much the same. Now, has that fluctuated over the years? Yes. Of course, during a recession, when property values go down, that changes. But that's always been the mix. We have about 3,000 acres of residential versus 600 of commercial. And unless we annex a lot of property, we're pretty much built out. So the development does have to go into areas we can redevelop, like Fairbanks, Lee Road. I think we both agree on that fact. So I'm not really concerned that there was some decline in the residential tax base, because that's occurred over the years, but the model we have works. Now, very lately, the city commissioned a study by the Economic Development Division of the city and the CRA, and this was reported, the results of that study were reported in the paper, I believe, by Mr. Freeman, and the report that was given to the commission pointed out increasing the commercial tax base sounds like a great theory, but in practice it's extremely difficult to accomplish. And I think the example that was used, you would have to have 30 Johnny Rivers barbecue places, that sort of thing, to move the needle a couple of percentage points. It's not going to happen. The best way that we can increase the commercial sector, in my opinion, is by more upscale development on Fairbanks. That is not going to be easy. For one thing, the lots are small. We're going to have to combine a lot of the lots to get bigger buildings there. But if we had higher end businesses, nicer, more attractive mix than we have now, there are three principal owners on Fairbanks. If we could get better redevelopment there, they could increase their rents. It would be good for the owners. It would be good for the city. But this mix that we have, it's a fiction to say we have got to increase our commercial tax base. We'll never be able to make an appreciable difference in that. With respect to Ravodage, Dan Bellows has been working on Ravodage for 10 years, trying to assemble all of those parcels. This is not any new development, and it's going to take him another, I don't know how many years. With the economy improving, maybe he'll do better than he has done in the past, but it's just been vacant land for a long time. But that property was annexed into Winter Park after he already had a developer's agreement with Orlando. So we have the developer's agreement that he negotiated before he was even in the city. So Ravodage is not going to come online anytime soon to make a whole lot of difference, because he's had a lot of problems with developing the parcels there. Some of that caused by the recession, but the recession's ending and maybe the pace will pick up a little bit. Mr. Leary and I fundamentally disagree about Ravodage. I don't know whether you're willing to share that legal opinion you have or what the date of that is, but that's a new document that all of a sudden has emerged during this election. And I haven't seen it, so I'm trying to remember it as it's been read to me, but I believe it starts out by saying if the developer had vested rights, then A, B, and C. That's a correct statement of the law. But the fact of the matter is, these were two different projects on, I call it the monstrosity. I get the name of it mixed up all the time. The Paseo. That apartment complex. These were two different projects. No permits were ever pulled. There was no vested right to development. Now, I hear, and at one time, the opposing campaign was putting out this paper that talked about permits being grandfathered in. Well, that's just a legal fiction. That doesn't happen. I'm a lawyer. You can tell your common sense would tell you permits don't get grandfathered in. You can't sit on a permit and not start development. So we fundamentally disagree on what the facts were here. But the facts can be plainly revealed by reading all the minutes from P&Z, reading the commission minutes. And this argument about this developer has vested rights, if we don't approve this highly dense development, we are going to get sued under the Burt-Harris Act. None of that was discussed at the time this project was approved. None of the commissioners were saying to each other, look, you guys, this is an emergency. If we don't approve this development, we can get sued because this developer has vested rights, and under Burt-Harris, we could really be in a mess. That's not in the record until now. And as I say, I haven't seen this legal opinion, and so I don't know when it was authored. But what Mr. Leary said at the time this project was approved was people all over the United States would kill to get a project like this. This is a first-class project. We should be celebrating. This is tremendous. There was never a statement we could be sued. So I frankly believe that's a lot of election rhetoric, and it's an entirely new argument. Now, let me think whatever other the the problem that I have with the apartments on Denning, well, let me back up just a moment. We have in place good land use regulations, a good code. We can attract high-end developers. Who wouldn't want to be in Winter Park? It's a paradise. We can attract that. My husband is a developer of apartments and subdivisions, not in Winter Park. He only develops in South Orlando and Volusia County. But I know what good development is, and I'm all in favor of it in Winter Park. The best example we have of recent good development is the Alfond. It's already a community treasure. People love it. It's being used by tourists for weddings, but also for local organizations for meetings, for local people eating dinner there. No accommodations had to be given to that developer to build that beautiful project. He actually built less than he was required to build. He did need a exception for parking. He couldn't get enough parking in there. There are plenty of times where those kinds of exceptions make perfect sense, and they did in this case, because he was able to lay off some of his parking in the Rollins parking lot down the street, and then he entered into a contract with All Saints Church right across the street from the Alfond for 40 additional parking places. That's fine. That's in everybody's interest because the church gets money for the building using its parking during the week, and then the church has it on the weekends. So that's perfectly fine with me. We've been able to attract Restoration Hardware, the CNL building on Denning next door to Paseo, Trader Joe's. These are all high-end developers. We can attract those developers without making these huge concessions in terms of density, increased setbacks. The setbacks between the Publix and the liquor store on the Paseo are 7 feet when they were 15 under the code. So you walk out and there's just this looming building. It's created a concrete canyon on Denning that is, the tree canopy's gone, and there's concrete from one corner to the next. Nobody, I haven't encountered one person in the months and months that I've been campaigning that says that's fantastic. I'm so glad we're here, that's here. And I think that's what's created this fallback position now that says, well, I don't really like it either, but maybe it'll turn out okay. It didn't have to be built, and I wouldn't have approved all the exceptions that the developer got. With respect to Trader Joe's, I would never have permitted that developer to lay off 40 parking spaces across the road. Parking spaces are a cost of development. I had a developer, a mutual friend of ours, in fact, who's developing all over Orlando, say, I've never been able to lay off my parking like that. He first wanted to buy, the developer of Trader Joe's first wanted to buy an old motel, maybe it's condominiums now, but it's right next door. He was trying to deal with the owner of that, and that deal fell through. The owner still says he would have given anything to have sold it for parking, and they couldn't come to an agreement. But the net result of laying off that parking across the street at the old Mount Vernon is that we have patrons and citizens who are having to cross 5 lanes of busy 1792. It's a danger. It's dangerous for pedestrians, and it's dangerous for drivers, and I never would have permitted that. I don't know if I've missed any of the other issues that were covered, but that is a fundamental difference between the two of us.
Mr. Leary, she has brought up a number of interesting issues here.
Sure.
And I guess the one that gets me is the Winter Park City Council not asking the right questions when developers are coming in?
Well, I think we need to clarify some things, and based on Ms. Mackinnon's points. She said that no permit was pulled, but then she said they don't lose your rights. You don't lose your rights if the permits are not executed.
Wait a minute, I don't think that's what I said, but I guess the record will be.
Don't lose rights based on permitting being pulled. is what I just wrote down. So let me just clarify.
That's not what I said.
You have entitlements. Of course you don't. You don't lose those entitlements whether or not a permit is pulled or not. You have entitlements on your home. If you go to pull a permit to build a patio, if you decide not to build that patio, you still have entitlements that are granted under the land use code and the comp plan. You still have those rights. You still have those entitlements. A permit really has nothing to do with this. Entitlements and permits are two totally different things. My opponent mentioned that there was a decline in residential versus commercial. I think she just meant the other way around. It's actually a decline in commercial. And increasing property size in Winter Park, we're not talking about that. Property size has nothing to do with it. If we have an acre of land and it's worth $1 billion and it's commercial, it's the value of the property. It's not the size of the land. It's got nothing to do with it. So we're not talking about creating more commercial property. We're just talking about getting projects on those properties that increase the value of that property. That's a fundamental difference that we need to talk about. I think talking about monstrosities and concrete jungles is also not really a way to encourage working with developers. It's not a way to have a positive message going forward. I think that's where we fundamentally disagree too. We have worked with people. We have asked the questions. And again, when we talk about Bert J. Harris, my opponent says that there was no discussion, no commissioner discussed this. There's no commissioners discussing a Bert J. Harris claim. We don't do we do all of our commission discussions between one another in the public, but I certainly don't do that with staff. And when I talk to staff and they say, listen, there's entitlements here and they have rights to this, and we can probably battle with them on the 50,000 square feet next door that they believe they're entitled to. We think we may have an argument for 17 units per acre. They believe they have 25 units per acre. And our counsel, and you meet with counsel and he says, it sounds like we may come up with a good solution here anyway. That's how you work with them. So the questions are being asked. The questions just may not, we don't go into a lot of detail in a lot of the detail that we bring to the commission. It's because we've already cleared it with staff and spoken to council and gotten advice and gotten positions, and they direct us. And when I talked about how proud we should be to have this property come online, remember, this was 2012. The economy was still pretty rocky in a lot of different places around the country. To have the CNL building, to have an apartment complex, and to have a senior living facility all being discussed at any one time, yeah, I was very proud of that. I was proud that people and developers and property owners said, you know what, Winter Park is friendly again. We can talk with staff and we can get good projects. I'm glad my opponent likes the ALP fund, because originally she said she'd only approve things that would go to code. That was against code. And there were concessions. She mentioned the CNL Tower and she mentioned Trader Joe's. We worked a lot on all of those projects to try to get those done. There were variances granted. They worked with us too. The discharge from the water on the CNL Tower is going into one of our lakes. We went in and dredged one of the lakes in Martin Luther King Park to create that ability for them to take the water that way. We worked with them on setbacks. We have a 75-foot setback along Morse, and it's tucked behind some great canopy oak trees that have been there a long time. The city of Winter Park is asking the right questions. Now, I understand that people have, and I think it's a very valid concern. People have concerns about specifically Paseo. I get it. I'm happy to have that discussion. The city has done a great job. All of the other great things that are going on in the city, I think are also worth talking about too. We get kind of hijacked about one building, and again, it's worth discussing, and we should talk about it. We should get the truth out, because right now the whole truth isn't out there. And when I talk to people and I say, did you know we took 75,000 square feet, 74,000 square feet of volume off that site? No, I didn't know that. Do you know it was approved in 2006? No, I thought you did it. No, I didn't do it. It was approved in 2006. What we did was we came back and we brought a project online. We made it smaller. We made it less volume on the site. So I think the city is asking the right questions. We talk about our core, and there is not the need. I think last night during one of the debates, we were all asked the question, would we like to see higher buildings downtown Winter Park? No, I don't think any of us is talking about that. Where I'm glad we do agree on Fairbanks and Lee Road. I hope my opponent appreciates the work I've done to make Fairbanks, to set up Fairbanks with my fellow commissioners we've led, and we work as a team, and on different projects, different people take the lead depending upon what we're doing. And I kind of took the lead on Fairbanks. And so I'm very proud to have said that I led that team, and we're going to be set up for Fairbanks, and we're setting that up for that commercial development we need. And there are problems on Ramadan, but they're not as great as some would have you believe, too. There are some, as always happens when you're trying to pull together a property of that size. So we do, to get back to your original question, and sorry I took the circuitous route, we are asking the right questions. And as I said, if you go back and you look at it, my opponent mentioned the smaller setback between the public liquor site and the building. Nobody goes there anyway. That is two commercial buildings backing up to one another. Is it tighter than was originally? Yeah, but we also have greater setbacks along, I believe it's either Canton or Denning, I can't remember which one, but we have greater setbacks. And the trees that they took down were diseased, dead, and dying. You can ask our arborist, she went through and checked them. But we have new trees going in there. They're 20 to 30 foot trees. Those trees will grow quickly. Would I like to see full grown canopy oaks there tomorrow? Absolutely. But it's not going to happen. They will be grown in a couple of years, and I think it will change the landscape over there.
Ms. Mackinnon, what role do you think the mayor should play in retaining or attracting businesses to the area?
I think the mayor needs to be a strong advocate for the city. I think it's a real easy sell because we, as I say, we are in a wonderful location. I mean, we are an oasis in the #1 tourist destination of the world. We are such a unique jewel in that whole setting. I don't think we're going to have any trouble attracting development, and I think the mayor needs to take the lead and be a serious advocate for all the advantages there are of building and working and living in Winter Park. One thing we have to be careful about, though, when the city makes these, when the city government makes these decisions that have zero public support, like the baseball field, like the proposed changes to the comp plan that my opponent and the mayor and Commissioner Sprinkle voted for, which would have drastically changed the comp plan. That was the precipitating factor for the development of the no-density movement, for example. When you have, we had a terrible dispute with the same developer of Ravaudage, Mr. Bellows, who wanted to put in a complex on Canton and Capon in the historic African-American neighborhood. He had bought 7 single-family lots, and he wanted to turn it into a 32-unit structure right next to and adjacent to single-family homes. And, of course, the community turned out again, not just the west side, but there were plenty of white people, too, that said, this is our town, and we don't want this kind of development in our town. But, excuse me, one of the representatives of one of the big developers that's has developed in Winter Park after a commission meeting, he said to me, you come to Winter Park and there are all these fights over everything, these disputes, and that discourages developers like me from coming. I said, I know it. That is a big problem. We've got to have a city government that is transparent, that is inclusive, that shares information with the public. Mr. Leary is, and he and I will never agree on what the facts and the law are on Paseo. We just won't. And as I say, I don't know what this legal opinion is. All I know is if the city and the staff believed in this so-called legal opinion that he now has, then they had a duty to explain to the residents before this monstrosity went up. We have to do this, folks, because we've made mistakes in granting entitlements. There was no conversation about that ever until now in election year. But getting back to my original point, it's not a good idea for the city to be careening from one ill-founded project to the next that lacks total lacks any sort of public support at all, it's going to discourage people from wanting to come to our city. And I want people who have good ideas and good plans for businesses that are going to add value to our community. I want them to know that you are very welcome to come with here. And of course we will work with you. The bottom line is a developer's interest and the mayor, the representative of the public, those interests are not always aligned. We had a developer the other night at the commission meeting lecturing the commission on how broken the system of development is because he can't get as big a complex as he wants on the old Mount Vernon site. Lecturing the commission on, you won't give me what I want, so I can't do a great project like I want. Well, his interests are different from ours. We don't need to be lectured by someone whose goal is to make money for his company. I don't begrudge him a dime that he needs to make for his company. That's his job. But our job is to maintain and enhance the beautiful jewel of a city we have. It is not to do any development that comes along just because this person's going to make a whole lot of money. So I think it's going to be a real easy sell for me as mayor to sell Winter Park because we've got a good story to tell. Who wouldn't want to be there? But we've got land use policies in place that we want to be complied with.
Mr. Leary, the same question, but I'm going to have to be unfair and ask you to give the Reader's Digest version.
We have this problem all the time that we are both so impassioned about this we could be here at dinner time.
I will try. I will certainly. Are they even in business anymore? So I'm not sure that's a good model to follow.
Yeah, I think they are, but
Okay.
they may be online. I'm not sure.
Well, I think I just need to clarify. But we don't just approve any development that comes for us. We talked. My opponent just mentioned the Mount Vernon. We've actually turned down 4 projects on that site. So that's something. My opponent mentioned zero public support for a lot of these projects like baseball and the comp plan changes, the plan development changes that she references. Not sure we actually had a lot of support in the community from baseball, and it's important that the commission not just strike things down out of their own personal needs. Whether or not I was ever going to go to a baseball game really is regardless. If we look at it as possibly a community asset, so I think that's important.
Let me ask you. You said
Sure.
that there was a lot of support for it. Did you guys do any polling of your residents to see who actually favored this project, or was this just anecdotal evidence?
It's all anecdotal. I mean, we had emails, we had people calling, we had people stopping us on the street. And again, I think it was so preliminary. We were going through the due diligence. We were trying to determine what sites would work and what kind of commitment the city can make and possibly the county can make and the ball team and Rollins. But there was support. And as for the comp plan changes that were proposed on plan development, those came from a consultant that the city hired. It's the same consultant that recommended we do a visioning process. Said your comp plan, there are inconsistencies between your comprehensive plan and your land development code. You need to clean these up and fix this up. And that was what some of the plan development language did. And also, just because we were looking at the plan development language, it doesn't necessarily mean that was going to allow massive developments along 4-lane roads. Plan developments are still guided by the land development code. If someone's granted a PD, they still have to meet the requirements of the LDC. That's just how that works. So again, this fear factor that we are going to have these monstrosities is just simply not accurate. It's just not the way it works. Back to the mayor's role, and something else my opponent said that just kind of struck me while we were talking about Dan's, the developer's project on Canton and Capon. She said that the West Side community came out, and so did plenty of white people. I just am a little surprised by that because I don't believe that those are two distinct things. We are a multiracial community. The West Side is very multiracial. And I'm very proud to represent all sections of the city. And I just think we need to be very cautious because I don't perceive the West Side to be one race or another. We are a pretty blended community. So we did have plenty of discussion, and we had plenty of discussion from folks that live on the West Side and folks that live outside of the West Side about what was going on there. And we got a better project out of it. We have 4 townhomes or 4 individual units going in now that are in great shape. But we had great conversations. And again, that's how we've been operating. To your original question about the mayor's role, Yes, absolutely. The mayor needs to be out there. The mayor needs to be able to also work with the EDC at the state level, and the county level, and the local level to try to find some incentives that are there to assist us with that. I've been working with the state level legislature, and I've been working at the county, and I've been working on trying to bring businesses to Winter Park, and I've been working on trying to bring businesses to the state in general. So it's something I'll continue to do.
May I just make one comment about the West Side?
Sure.
The West Side was platted historically as it was called Negro Town. It was always perceived to be an African American community. And growing up here as a child, it always was. It was single family residences. The implication that it's a reflection of past times, the way it was platted, but it still is predominantly African American. But this whole thing about the West Side is actually what propelled me into the mayor's race, because I read an article in the paper sometime in the spring that I thought misrepresented facts about the West Side, because I was on the CRA when Mr. Bellows first started his development, and I read things that I thought were misrepresentations, and I fired off this letter to the editor. All of a sudden they called up and said, we want this to be in my word column. But people on the West Side have continually lost the battle to preserve their community. It's been overrun by out-of-town developers who have bought up a lot of single-family homes and tried to put up these mega mansions. The good news is that finally all of our town realizes this is in nobody's best interest. If we lose a historic neighborhood, I don't care if it's on Lake Maitland or it's on the West Side. And the West Side had to get a friend of theirs who was a planner from Miami, Mr. Cambrick. He came up to help them fight City Hall on the project that was proposed, and it was a battle. We had meetings at Ward Chapel on how to accomplish all of this. So there hasn't been a cooperation between the city and the West Side. I'm not saying it's all the current commission. Historically, that neighborhood has been up against it from city government in Winter Park, but that's changed now, because I think that people have become united in thinking that all of our neighborhoods count. And we've seen what 1792 and the commercial development there, the impact it's had on the West Side, which is directly adjacent to that. So I think the implication that I'm sort of setting up some artificial division between African American and Caucasian or white people in Winter Park is just plainly wrong. I'm not suggesting that at all.
Well, my opponent just caught herself. She started to refer to folks on the West Side as those people, and I just
Mr. Leary, that's really insulting.
We're going to move on.
That's
I just
really
have an issue with
insulting.
this.
Okay,
I'm disappointed.
Okay, we're going to move on to something lightning round here. You can quickly tell me, Mr. Leary, where you stand on the potential to purchase the USPS building downtown.
Currently, I'm not in favor of it, given the deal terms that have been laid out. Purchasing the property, building them a new retail center as well as a distribution center, it is. We're talking anywhere between $10 and $30 million, depending upon locations and depending upon sites that they would approve to. I don't believe at this stage, given the zoning, that it is zoned parkland. They will have in the future an opportunity to sell that property as the post office continues to run into situations, the financial challenges. And as it's zoned parkland, we are the natural buyer for that. I don't believe we need to go out and I used the example a few years back. It would be akin to buying a Barnes and Noble location, given the increase of online books and Amazon and those things. I think we can wait a few years. We can wait out the post office, and I think we'll be in prime shape to pick up that land in the future for a lot less than they're offering today.
Ms. Mackinnon, your position?
If we could get control of that property, which is adjacent to our Central Park, under a deal that made economic sense, I'm very much in favor of that. Right now, all the discussions are so preliminary. I don't know whether it does make economic sense. I've heard a lot of different permutations on how this might be accomplished. So I don't, as I say, I don't know whether we could get a deal that would make sense. But for many, many years, the feds have said property's not for sale. Now we have some movement on that. So if it's possible it's for sale, I would rather us control it than the federal government, but only if it makes economic sense.
Ms. Mackinnon, on the library issue, do you favor renovation or building from scratch?
We have it right in place right now, a board of people, of citizens looking at all these issues. What they report back to the citizens, and I don't have any reason to believe that any of them has any vested interest. They all seem to me to be very hardworking people trying to do a good job, that particular building is not susceptible to rehab or to adding on to, that so many of the walls that would have to be moved or changed are load-bearing, that we have to consider different sites. And I don't have any reason to doubt that they've done their due diligence in reaching this conclusion. But at one of the neighborhood gatherings I had, there were some architects there that said, I just don't buy that. These people said, we have libraries in the United States that are 150 years old, so this is hard to buy. And I said, I wish that you would go and talk to, explain your position to the library board, because I have confidence in their judgment, and they say that we cannot rehab that building. I like the location if it were possible to stay there, because it's a good gateway into the city. But I also accept the volunteer library committee's statement that if we can't stay there, it can't be done, the building can't be rehabbed.
Mr. Leary, your position?
Whatever makes financial sense. I think that we've already checked into it. And the first report we got back from the library board originally was that rehabbing that building was really going to be a cost. There was going to be cost prohibitions on it in order to make it work for what we need. But it's evident that we need to do something in reconfiguring or creating a new building. And if we do it on site, I'm fine with that. I mean, I'd like to keep it downtown if we can. But I also think there's an opportunity some other sites that we may look at. So I don't believe it makes financial sense to reconfigure the existing structure given the structural issues of the building.
What are your thoughts on when and how long citizens can speak at your board meetings? Should there be any limits placed on that, Mr. Leary?
I think there has to be limits, and currently we have 2 minutes, and that seems to usually be sufficient. But it's not uncommon for someone that needs a little extra time to ask the mayor or to have a commissioner support them to give them a little bit extra time. I think it's important just to try to set some type of schedule. But as I said, we frequently allow people who are deep in thought, who have additional things, comments to proceed and carry on a little bit longer.
Ms. Mackinnon?
Yeah, I think there need to be limits. And I don't disagree with anything Mr. Leary said.
Here's a question. In New York, the two previous mayors sought to make practical changes to the city's quality of life by introducing some straightforward ideas like smoking bans, whether you agree with it or not, and bike lanes. Name me one simple idea that could significantly improve daily life for people who live in Winter Park. And I guess I'll go ladies first.
I get the hard one. We've got to get, this is not a simple answer to a simple question, I recognize. We've got to get a handle on traffic. And that's going to be difficult because we have outside pressures on our traffic. I want to see us invest in the latest technology for stoplights, for example, these lights that sense oncoming traffic, so that the timing works. People can travel roads more easily. I think traffic is addressing traffic issues is one thing that would really increase quality of life, but it is not an easy fix. If I could get two, I'd say bike lanes too.
You can steal that one, Mr.
Well, I think it's interesting. We are working on we're attempting to configure around Brookshire School specifically some bike lanes. So that is important, and I think safety is incredibly important to me. It's one of the reasons I was so interested in the urban forestry management plan and trying to get the city's first plan, a comprehensive plan, pulled together, because I was very concerned, as anybody that lives in Winter Park, that would see trees and branches and limbs falling down. It's a big concern of mine, safety. So we have an individual in there going through our bike and ped board right now to try to work with the city and other municipalities to get funding for these lanes to try to get biking for kids to school.
What do you think about the status of the tree canopy in Winter Park, Ms. Mackinnon? Is the city doing enough to stay on top of replacing aging?
Is this a lightning
trees?
round question?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the clock. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I saved that for last.
Let me try and make this a short answer then. Is the city doing the right thing? Absolutely not. We had two catastrophic occurrences: the hurricanes in 2004, 3 of them, and we also 50, 60 years ago planted hundreds of laurel oaks, which have a life expectancy of now. They're all declining. So what has the city done in the last 5 years to address two issues that one was foreseeable and one happened 11 years ago? Cut $100,000 from the tree budget. We used to have a forestry department of 14 employees and a budget of over $1 million. Trees have been a big deal, a tree plan, a big deal since the 50s in Winter Park. The city had been divided into 4 quadrants, and we had staffed those quadrants with 3 or 4 people who were solely responsible for that neighborhood. Those were, after the hurricane, those were called the lean teams, as in leaning trees, because their job was to go in and remove the trees that were so damaged by the hurricanes that they presented a danger. The forestry department no longer exists. We had 2 people with 30-year careers as arborists there that were let go. We now have 1 arborist, and she reports to administration. This so-called new urban forestry plan is not new at all. It's just a new name